Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to take us a little bit further in the marine theme, but how can we actually take some energy from the waves that we see offshore and close to shore and turn that into energy and do it at a price that customers are willing to pay. This has often been one of the challenges in wave energy, is how can we actually make it work at the right cost. The wave energy opportunity has been shown to be very large. The Carbon Trust have done a number of studies in the UK particularly that show that it's a very large resource. But most of the Western Europe and advanced economies are actually based around a grid economy where costs are very low. So we are actually addressing initially diesel markets where that cost of energy is at least an order of magnitude greater. And we have identified and indeed visited markets and have identified partners to look at island and remote communities and a rapidly growing market or an opportunity in offshore aquaculture. So how are we going to do that? Because nobody has come up with a standard wind turbine or tidal turbine. Those two technologies are both working with a two-dimensional laminar flow. Wave energy, just to be complicated, is more complicated, and therefore you've got to have something that works to capture energy from a circular particle motion. And if this works correctly, and thankfully it has, you'll see a video on the screen here showing an array of buoyant members and link arms that create a hexagonal shape of space frame that is moved by the energy in the waves, creating mechanical movement. We capture that at each node with a hydraulic system with other options that we can look at, and we use that hydraulic energy to drive a motor and generator set to produce the electricity. You'll see, if you look at any part of that structure, it's following that circular particle motion, and you'll also see that each unit sits within the array and actually reacts not just with the waves, but with the rest of the array, which actually gives us more energy. So how have we been actually taking this to market? Because technology is one thing, but it's only worthwhile if we can actually get people to develop volume and an industry. The market was identified back in 2009 by talking, in this case, I'm really looking at aquaculture as one part of that diesel engine market. We got some funding in 2012 on a competitive basis from the Cabinet Office to look at a greeniest feasibility study on how we could apply wave energy to provide the power needs of offshore aquaculture. In 2012, we had our first demonstrator in the water in a sheltered environment. In 2014, we put 3 units into the water on a site that was where we worked with Marine Harvest, and actually we featured the small image at the side there is actually from the planet section of their 2014 annual report. So it's not just cost that's important, it's value too. And in 2015, from 25 greeniest feasibility studies, we were one of 6 selected for a demonstrator, and we produced a 6-unit array, but couldn't actually fulfill all of the requirements because we couldn't actually get access to customer sites for some of the reasons that have appeared on the screen as we went along there. The real world, there are issues arising as these aquaculture sites move into more energetic wave environments. They needed confidence that our device wasn't going to break apart and cause the fish to escape. And that has led us to finally get onto the site in 2017 and get a 6-unit array commissioned. So leading from prototype development, we've then gone on to what we call the Series 6, which is that diesel engine replacement product. There is the opportunity to move further on and look at larger units where we can bring the cost down to the levels that will be required to compete within the grid space, and not necessarily competing with solar or with the lower costs, but by actually blending different renewable inputs, you can actually cover baseload more effectively, and we see that we're actually competing with the battery. We've been very successful, we think, in actually getting support for what we're doing. We've had both grant money and investment money from Scottish Government and from UK Government, and the one at the top I'll talk about shortly is looking at an Innovate UK funding that we're currently working with. And that actually represents over 50% of the funds that we've deployed to date, which are approximately £4.5 million for 8 years of effort, and representing a significantly more capital efficient route than some of the earlier efforts in wave energy. This is what our current project looks like. We've got an array of 6 of those units, which is actually the same as you were looking at the underwater piece from earlier. And we're working with Marine Harvest and Wave Energy Scotland to deliver that. Very quickly, we are working on our Innovate UK project, which is working with TWI and Brunel University to look at predictive data and preventative maintenance. And what we're looking for in the next year will be development funding of up to 1 million to do 2 things. One is to reduce the energy costs to achieve diesel parity. We're close, but not quite there. And the second is to take the first steps towards scaling up towards large-scale arrays. And additionally, we'd be looking for project finance of up to 5 million to look at the first wave of projects around the world. Thank you very much for your attention.